where we're going to talk about we can look at it like a giant of the faith. And we've been looking at that through Hebrews chapter 11, a lot of the main figures from the Old Testament. And one of these guys, this is Moses we're going to look at today. We know him. It's a guy, even if you don't have much background in church, you probably know something about Moses. So we're going to look at him today and just see what he did and really just look at a little part of his life. Because as I was going through my sermon, I just really kind of landed on one part of what he's about. But as we've been going through this, I think what can happen, here's what I see happens with people, is we look at people like Moses and a lot of these guys in this faith chapter in Hebrews chapter 11, I think we wrongly assume that they just started off with something that we just don't have. And I've spoken about this before, but sometimes I see this in people. When we're reading the Bible, we just feel like that these people, like Moses and the things where he could go out there and, by God, part the Red Sea and all this amazing stuff, it just seems fairy tale-like. And I think we wrongly assume sometimes that they had something that we don't. Like they have some type of faith gene, some type of mechanism inside of them. Like, I just don't have that. And as a result of that, if we're not careful, we'll just read the Bible or we'll just hear some of these stories and it really does nothing to us. We just see this and it's just like a story that can't really affect my life because I can't really be used by God to do this because they just had something I don't have. It's cool to read about these stories, Kyle, but I can't do the things that they did. And that's what happens if we wrongly assume that they had something that we don't have. Now I'm going to talk a whole lot about it, but I do want to just say here in the beginning that Moses was just a person like us. He really was. I mean, you're not going to see this. You're not going to read this and really let it have the impact on us that it should have if we're seeing something any different than that. Moses was just a person like us. All these people in here were just regular people. There was nothing extraordinary about them. It was just what we've been talking about, something really simple. It was their faith, just trusting in God. And it was him doing all this stuff, and he just works through us by our faith in him. So I want you guys to understand that from the very beginning here, through all this, through these people. They're just regular people. So don't think that you can't relate to them in that way. Like God can't use you in that way. I just want to say that from the beginning here. So we're going to read now in Hebrews chapter 11. I'm going to start in verse 23. I'm just going to read 23 right here. But Hebrews 11:23. Said by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months. This is going to be speaking about the very beginning. I want to just kind of speak about his history there. But by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw that he was no ordinary child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. So here's the whole story. You can go back and read in Exodus chapter 1 and chapter 2 if you want, in the very beginning of the Bible, the second book. You can read about this. It gives it a little bit more detail. But Moses here, he's in this time. You see what's happening is that there's this new king, there's this new Pharaoh, and he is really scared about these guys coming up, the Israelites growing. There are just so many of them, and he's worried about them taking over his kingdom. Now, just a little backstory. If you guys were here when we talked about Joseph, here's the story where that happened. Joseph was there. Remember, Joseph went through his 13 years, if you were here in that sermon, of just his long trials and his testing and all that. He went into prison wrongfully, and he eventually got to this place where God wanted him, where he was like second in command over Egypt. He was like ruling over all that. Well, that's the story. He ends up bringing all his family back over. So now they're over there in Egypt, and this is a little bit later than that. So this king, this is a different Pharaoh. It says he didn't really know anything about Joseph, didn't care anything about him. So now you have all these Jews there, and they've grown so much. Families have grown. There's so many of them there, and now this guy doesn't really like them, and he wants to kill them all. He's telling his people, he's paranoid. He's saying, these guys, if somebody comes in and tries to take us over, all these Hebrews, they're going to go and be with these people. They're going to turn against us, and they're going to take us out. And he was paranoid in so many ways, and this is what's happening here. And it's interesting if you read about any type of many leaders in the past, many kings, pharaohs, and just dictators of the past. I find it interesting that they were very paranoid of people taking over their power. It happened a lot. I've read about a lot of them. They were paranoid. And as a result, you can see it even in the Bible. They would kill off people around them. They would kill off their family, like their kids. They were just paranoid of them taking their power. Their spouses, they would do all of this stuff. And that's what's happening. This is the scary situation, just what's happening this time. He's worried about these guys coming in there and taking over his power. And so he's going to be issuing this edict. He wants his midwives to go in there. He's like, okay, whenever the Hebrews, whenever they have kids, whenever it's boys, I want you guys to go in there, these midwives, go in there and kill these boys. Because I don't want them to grow up. I don't want this army. I don't want them to get any bigger than they are. They're getting out of control right now. So he tells them to do this. The problem was, for Pharaoh here, is that these midwives feared God more than they feared the Pharaoh. So he's telling them, okay, go in there and kill these babies. And they're like, we're not going to do this. They went there and they allowed them to live. And Moses is part of this. Moses is in this story of some of these midwives allowing him to live. And so that's what's happening right here. And you see this about Moses right here. And it mentions, if you go and read a little bit more detail in Exodus 1 and 2, is that Moses' mom hid him for 3 months. I don't know exactly how all this happened, but she's hiding him for 3 months, and then she couldn't do it anymore. And I don't know what all was happening, but I know babies cry. I know babies smell. I mean, I may not know that now, but I remember in the past. But they smell, they're loud. Maybe there's diapers, maybe I guess it was Clausen or whatever, but there's all this stuff you got to worry about. And it was probably really difficult to hide them for 3 months. And then it went on and she couldn't do it anymore. And that's kind of what's happening there. So she's going to build this little basket. I don't know, you look at it, it's a basket, it's an ark, it's some type of little boat, and she puts it in the Nile River, hides it in the reeds. I don't think she was intending on like pushing it down the river, like, farewell, my baby was good for 3 months. She wasn't doing that like a message in a bottle. Maybe somebody will get it. She hides him in the reeds. Now, I don't know exactly what all their plan was or what all she was thinking about, but she's putting it in there and putting the baby in there. It's like, I can't do anything else about this. And so she hides her daughter in there, Miriam. She's out there watching what's going to happen. And this is where God kind of pulls in. His sovereignty is reigning over this. And so Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, comes down there to take a bath in the Nile, which I'm glad for indoor plumbing now. But she's going down there to take a bath in the Nile and sees this baby, and she has this compassion for this baby. And I think it's kind of cool because Miriam's there, his sister, and she's waiting. She's like watching to see what's going to happen. And I don't know how this is all playing out. And she's like, oh no, there's a princess. So I got to pretend like this was just, coincidence. I'm walking by. Maybe she's walking out. She's like, oh, the princess. I'm sorry. I can't be looking at you. And she's like, oh, you have a baby right there. Do you want me to help you out and go find one of the Hebrew women to really kind of take care of that baby for you? Like, it seems like she's planning all this out. The princess is there, sees this baby, and now Miriam, strategically comes strolling out, Maybe we need to go find a Hebrew woman to help you take care of that baby. And she's like, sure, go do that. And what does she do? Miriam goes to her mom, which is Moses' mom. And it's amazing how that really works out. So she goes back, and I can imagine maybe that story, how that went, like, hey, Mom, this worked out perfectly. The princess is going to actually ask you as a favor to take care of Moses, your own baby. And it works out that way. And I love how God was working all that out. He had a plan for Moses through all this. And that's what's happening. So that starts his being raised in Pharaoh's household. His mom was still a part of it there in the beginning. And then he's being raised in Pharaoh's household when Pharaoh was trying to get rid of all these boys right here. So let's read a little bit further now. In verse 24 through 27, still in Hebrews 11. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who was invisible, speaking of God right there. Now, again, you can go back and you can read this story more in depth in Exodus 2, and I encourage you to do that, and you can see what's happening. And it's just a whole lot in there of Moses, his life, and everything that's happening right there. But you can also go back into Acts chapter 7, and this, another crazy story of Stephen, right before he's going to be stoned, he's giving the people the gospel. He's telling them, he's talking to them about everything. It really kind of starts from the beginning and just explains all this, the history of God's people and him working. And he mentions a part here about Moses in Acts chapter 7. And he speaks about this point. He says when Moses was 40 years old, so it's at this point right here when he really kind of steps out. He's kind of coming of age, and he talks about that. I don't know if he's really finding himself, like, what does it mean to be in Pharaoh's household, whatever it is. He's at this age. He's 40. He's growing up. I'm 40. Maybe it's like there's hope, and stuff like that. But he's there, and he's stepping out, and Stephen is talking about this. He's talking about him at age 40. And here's what happens. Now, here's the story of it. Again, read this more in depth. But Moses goes, and he sees one of the Egyptians beating one of his people, one of the Hebrews. They're slaves now, and he's out there, and he's beating him. And it just angers him in a lot of ways. And so he goes up there, and it says he's looking out there, kind of looks left, looks right, looks around for somebody, and he kills this Egyptian who's beating one of his people. He goes out there and kills him. That's what it says. And then he comes back, later, another time, and a couple of the Hebrews, they're talking, they're kind of having an argument, and he comes up there, he's trying to break this up. He's like, hey guys, what are you guys doing right there? And they're mad. They're like, what do you care? Are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian the other day? And that's when Moses is like, oh man, somebody saw this. Like, I'm in trouble. Like, he thought nobody saw this, and that's what's happening. And this really kind of it pushes him from this life of being in Pharaoh's household, in this ease of having all these pleasures and everything. And so you see that in Exodus about him having to push out because the Pharaohs wanted to kill him. But I think it was interesting as I was reading this week is that here in Hebrews 11, it's a little bit more of kind of supplemental. It kind of gives us a little bit more detail. You see in Exodus that he was just kind of pushed out. He had to. But now you see right here, he speaks about Moses choosing to really kind of step out. So I think it's part of it. I think it's a little bit more detail right there. He's choosing to step out away from the pleasures of this household. Now he kind of was forced in a lot of ways, but he's stepping out there to really help his people, and he's stepping away from this easy lifestyle, this being taken care of and living in Pharaoh's household and having everything for him. And so that's really what's happening there. So if you get anything from this today, and from all these people that we've discussed here, like Moses and the others, is I want us to understand that we have to take a stance for God. We do. There's going to be times when maybe you can be very weak and just stay back and not let anybody know that you're falling for God. And I would question really your commitment level there. But I'm telling you, like as people of God, we have to take a stance for God. In fact, write it down this way. Here's a question that I would ask for you guys. And I really want you to ask it as we're here. It's not something I'm just putting up there for effect or whatever, but seriously ask yourself, we're here for a little while, and then you're going to go off and do your own thing. So it's just seriously like take an assessment of your life. Are you willing to take a stance for God, even if it costs everything? And that's a deep question. That's something that, this is honestly what I believe. I think we could go around and we would all probably just answer pretty quickly. We could read this. We're comforted in here. There's nothing going on. We're not really worried about our lives right now. If you are, tell us and we'll try to help you. I'm not sure what's going on. But we're probably pretty comfortable right now. There's nothing really going on in that way. So if we're reading that and I say, what's your answer to that? Probably most of us would be like, I'll take a stance for God, even if it costs me everything. But maybe I'm being pessimistic. I'm just honestly being honest on that. I'm not so sure if we're really put in that position, if everybody who says that, everybody maybe just in the worldwide church, is really truthful in that way, if we're put to the test in that way. Are we really willing to take a stance for God, even if it costs us everything? I don't know. I don't know if that's all of us, if we would really think that way. And I think that's where Moses is. I think that's where these people are. Again, they didn't have anything different than we have. They didn't have this extra faith gene. God gives us the ability to have faith, but every one of us can exercise it. They didn't have anything extra. It was just their faith and trust in God. Now, it didn't always go perfectly for them. We saw that with Joseph. We see that with him. He loses, Moses here, his lifestyle, this comfort and ease. He loses all that. You see what's happening there. Are we willing to take a stance for him, even if it costs us everything? When we look at Moses here, I also think when we read the Bible and we read about him, we wrongly assume that it was just like action-packed all the way through. I think I've talked about this, maybe in home groups or maybe when we're just talking with each other, but we can look at this. This is, when I say we wrongly, maybe I'm just saying me when I read the Bible sometimes. I used to look at this and it's just like, man, it was just action all the time. Like stuff was just happening all over the place. And then you see us and it's like, I don't see this stuff everywhere. I don't know if you maybe have that same feeling. Sometimes when you look at the Bible, it just seems like stuff was just happening all over the place. Like just like a $1 billion budget Marvel movie, like just happening like all over the place. Like you're just worn out from the action. seeing that all the time. I don't know if sometimes you feel that way as you read the Bible. I want to let you know, though, that this is giving us highlights in many ways. I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm not trying to push you out of here, lower your expectations of God doing things. I don't want to do that. In fact, today I want to raise that. But I do want you to understand as we're reading this, it is some highlights. There are some times when they are like us and they're in this valley and this place where they're like, I don't understand what's happening here. Like Joseph, those 13 years, I don't know what's happening here, but God was doing a major work in his life. He was preparing him for this enormous place he was going to be putting him, but he was in the middle of that craziness. Moses here, look, in Acts 7, it talks that he was 40 when he left there. The next big thing that really happens with Moses is when he's 80. You know, the burning bush, if you see that. Talks about that in Acts chapter 7. It was 40. I don't really have a whole lot that's going on in his life. Here's really what I can say what's happening, if you're wondering, is that Moses left Pharaoh's household. He left red carpet to become like a shepherd. So it's red carpets to sheep and poop. You know, it's that's really where he left from. So that's where he is. Huge change in lifestyle. Humbling thing, and that's what's happening. So he left there, gets married, and he's working for, his father-in-law. Jethro, which is funny. So, I don't know, Tennessee or something, wherever they're at, But he's working for him, and he's just shepherding, and he's doing all this, and he sees this burning bush, which is amazing. It wasn't just burning up, and it was burning, but it wasn't being consumed. It was a strange sight. It was something that I can imagine a shepherd out there is looking, and he's like, this is kind of weird. I think I can step away from the sheep for a minute and see this. It was a burning bush that wasn't being consumed, and it was God speaking to him. Again, a crazy type of thing that really happened there. I'm not expecting all that to happen to us, speaking of burning bushes, but that's what's happening. It was this long period. 40 years now, he's 80, and that's what's happening. So here's what I see. In fact, write this down. Faith demands patience and waiting. I've been saying that really throughout this series. Maybe that's not fun to read. Maybe you want to see something more exciting and just more eye-appealing or whatever, but it's faith demands patience and waiting. It really does. We want to see stuff happen. We want to be faithful people of God, but that patience and waiting, that's hard for me. I want to see stuff right away, but it demands patience and waiting. That's what I've been seeing throughout all this. When I read these stories of these people and how they were used by God, they didn't have anything different. They just trusted in God. They had faith. They had faith that was willing to be patient. They had faith that was willing to wait. They had faith that was I see something that it's in God. So all this stuff doesn't really matter to me, and I have patience. God's going to do something. I will wait for him, and I'll just continue to trust him. And that's what I see in these people. It demands patience and waiting. It requires you to go through some time when you don't know what's going to happen. Isn't that right? That's not always easy, but it requires you to go through some time period where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen here. That happens to me all the time. It's easy for me to come up here and talk about it, but when I'm in the middle of it, it's so hard to be there and know what's going to happen on this other side. It's so hard for me. But in that middle, that is just, I can't say that enough. That is where you grow the most when you're going through that time period. You're either going to trust in him or you're going to turn away. It's always that. We have that choice, but that is where we grow. It demands that. It demands we go through those things. When I was studying through this, again, this is just how my studies go, my sermons. Sometimes I'll go off on rabbit trails. I do all the time. I'll be reading something and I want to go this way and this, and I'll read these rabbit trails. Sometimes it goes with it, but then other times I'm off on just reading all this stuff. That's just me. I don't know if that's ADD Bible study, but I'll do that. And I was wondering about how far really here to go with Moses and looking at his life, because you know what happens? It's he's there, he sees this burning bush, and then it's God's calling him to this amazing mission. I want you to go to Pharaoh. Why don't you ask him to let my people go, And then the song, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, was in my head, I was singing that. And so I was going through that. And then we could talk about him. We could talk about the plagues, the 10 plagues, and how crazy that was. And then I saw on TV this last week, the Gods of Egypt. Is that what it is with Christian Bale? Don't watch that if you're trying to see what this is going to be like. It's just crazy. It's way wrong and all that. But you see it, and it talks about the parting of the Red Sea. We see the amazing things like that. And again, Christian Bale, it's oh my gosh, what were they doing in that? He goes in there and actually gets washed over. And I'm like, what are they doing here? Anyway, I see that, and I see the giving of the law and all these different things. And there's so much you can talk about with Moses and with his life and how he was used by God. But I couldn't get past really the first part in verses 26 and 27. To me, that's what really kind of sets the tone for all of it right there in verses 26 and 27. He just talked about the big points. He regarded disgrace for Christ as greater than all the riches because he was looking forward to his reward. Like faith, that's what we're talking about. He's faith. He says, you know what, I'll suffer for Christ. Like this is greater than, all these things. Like I can see ahead, like my faith in Christ. Like riches, all this stuff doesn't really matter. It's my reward of being with God in heaven forever. And again, that's what faith is. It's like pushing all this stuff aside. He walked in this world just like us. He went through the same things as us. Different culture, different times. We have technology now a little bit different, but he's just a person like us. Had struggles, had temptations, but he was looking forward to being with God. And that's what I see as I look in those verses there. It's so much different. In fact, write this one down again. He chose Jesus over the comfortable. And that's what we need to do. He chose Jesus over the comfortable. It's these simple points that we can look at there, but they make a profound difference in our life. When we actually do that, choosing Jesus over the comfortable, choosing Jesus over the easy life, choosing Jesus over what the world tells us. And that's what it is. I mean, it comes down to that. I mean, you want to come here, you want to hear what this is about. What is this book talking about? What is this creator saying? He's saying, I want you to choose me over all this stuff. It's really, that's what it comes down to. It's a simple statement. It's not always easy for us to do that, though. But that's what he's asking of us. We have that same choice today. Like I said, I wanted to go deeper into some of this stuff here. But I just was looking at what Moses was talking about there. His faith is what drove him. That's what he saw. He saw his belief in God, and that's what pushed him further. So I was asking myself these questions. Look at this. We read this we're in our Philippians series. This is Philippians 1:21. To live is Christ, to die is gain. So I was asking myself that. What does this mean for me to live as Christ, to die as gain? That's what Paul said. And I've mentioned this, maybe even last week. Paul wrote this in prison. And he had this understanding. He had this way of living. And he said that. He said, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. And this is just me where I'm at. I'll draw this to an end here pretty soon. But this is where I'm at in my life. And I'm wrestling with this. Like, what does that mean to live as Christ, to die as gain? I'm asking myself these questions. Even this next verse. Because I think Paul was asking that. Moses was even asking that. Same type of question that Paul was saying right there. And then Hebrews 11:1. What does it mean that faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see? What do these things mean? What does that mean to have this type of faith? What does it mean to have faith that can move mountains? That's what I've been really wrestling with as I've been going through this series. And even as I've been in this church and in the short life of it, I think that God has been doing some kind of shaking and shaping of me and kind of getting me to understand and try to understand some of these things. And I think this is so important for us to get. I honestly do have, this is one of those sermons where I got so much stuff, really, that I just want to like throw at you guys and go down it. And I try to wrap it in this 30-minute, package or whatever for you. And there's so much. This is one of those days that it's really hard for me to be like, I just being completely honest to you guys, like I have this sense of urgency of just, man, wanting to share everything that I possibly can. Like I want us to get this. I want everybody here to get this. And online, we now put our sermons online. So our millions of followers online, literally millions, I don't know, literally tens of followers online. But no, I want to get this out there because I have this sense of urgency. Like I truly do. I want you guys to like feel this passion and have the same thing as like, man, I want to get this out to people. This is the truth, and this is what we need to do. And so it's all about faith. What does it mean to be a follower of Christ and to read this and to follow him in this world? And it just really comes down to faith. I mean, this simple word, it's so huge for us to really get to understand this faith, and it's trusting in him. I'm going to read something here. This will be my last thing. I don't have it up on the screen. But I want to read this. This is, I say, equally shocking and amazing, really, at the same time. It's one of those. This guy, Ezekiel, has this vision, and I should ask you guys to play this. So there's a song by Lauren Daigle on this. It's really crazy, but it was late in the week. I wasn't going to ask you guys to change this because this is sometimes my sermons like take a right turn sometimes later in the week. And so that's what happened. And I was reading this, and he has this vision. And I want you guys to understand, because I want to like do the text justice. This is God speaking to Ezekiel. It's about the Israelites. They're in captivity. So I want you to understand this. Not everything completely relates to us in a lot of ways when we read the Old Testament stuff. Sometimes we wrongly try to make it just like us. But he's talking to him about them being in captivity, and he gives this really shocking vision of how it's going to be, and really just a picture of who God is. And he's like, do you believe that I can do this? And so I want to read this. This is Ezekiel 37. It's just called the Valley of the Dry Bones. He said, the hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out of the spirit of the Lord, and he set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. And he asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you know me. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you'll know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied, and I was commanded, as I was commanded. And I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them. I know this is really graphic and gruesome here, but I just want you to see this. But there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophecy, Son of man, say to it, this is what the Sovereign Lord says. Come, breath from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, and that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, and they came to life and stood on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, this is what the Sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am your Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I am the Lord, that I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it, declares the Lord. You know, and I was reading that. It's such a graphic, it's a weird picture. I mean, I don't know, we're visual people. I want to see like videos of this, you know, and how that's crazy. He's taken to this place in this vision. He sees all this out there. And I picture him going to him just saying, Zeke, because he probably called him Zeke, you know, like, what do you see out there? Like what is this? Just, you know, tell me, what do you see? And he's looking, and he's like, you know, don't be afraid. It's death. It's death, isn't it? And he sees it. He just sees bones everywhere. A crazy picture. And he's like, do you think I can raise these? Do you think I can do this? Do you think these bones can live? And I got to think I think, you know, you could do anything. And he does. And then he goes on to tell him, he's like, I want you to speak to them. And I think about us, it's like speaking to really just a dead culture, going out there and talking to them. And this is what I was thinking about as I was reading this. It's like there's times when it's easy for us to get down, maybe as the church, as people. And I've read all kinds of things this week about what's wrong with the church. And there's a whole lot of things. You know, we can go in it. It's almost a cool thing to do, to like make a video or something to talk about what's wrong with the American church, right? There is a lot wrong with the American church. But it's almost cool to put those things out there. And I was reading those, and I was getting down, just reading some of that stuff. And so we look and we can say, like, man, the state of the church, the American church sometimes is maybe looks exciting, but the depth of it and what we're all about sometimes, the Spirit of God moving, doing stuff, it almost just seems like it's dry bones, like there's nothing happening. And so I was thinking about that. I was just looking, and it's like, I want to see God do something big like that. I want to see him raise that. And he's asking him, do you think I can do this? And I think he's almost asking us as the church, like, do you think I can do this? Do you think I can? We talk about revival, and revival is not just like, you know, 5 days a week we have some messages, we schedule it or whatever. It's like revival. It's like true, like revival inside of us. Like we're living for God. We're sold out to him. We look at this book, we read this, and we actually do that. We have faith like people like Moses and these people. That's what revival is. And so I think in a way I was almost just thinking about that. Like, do you think I can do this? And I believe God can do things like that. I believe he can raise up this church that sometimes we look at the American church that is just dead. And I think he can raise it up if we go to him, if we trust in him. So what does that look like? What does a movement of God in our life look like? It doesn't require us. He's not asking for us to fill the offering plate. He's not asking for us to watch more TBN, you know, or something. He's not asking us to say more these and thous in our sentences, or call each other brother and sister more, or show up here more, and just act the part. It's a true change in our hearts. It's truly reading his word and actually doing what it says. It's coming together. It's being his people. It's loving each other. It's being in that family. It's doing what he says. It's actively seeking him in faith. And I heard somebody say, and I thought this was actually Francis Chan's wife, and she was quoting from somebody, and she was talking about their faith, and she said, we err on the side of action, and I thought, man, that's perfect. Like for faith, isn't that great? It's like, that's what I want to like leave you guys here with. I think we should do is like, let's err on the side of action, not on caution, but let's err on the side of action. Let's follow God with everything that we have. Let's step out there in active faith, because that's what I think these guys were doing. Moses, how he was used by God, why he wasn't afraid of these guys coming at him in his life is like he could see God. He had faith to trust in him, and he was going to follow him with everything. Let's err on the side of action. Let's follow him if we want to see God do something big. If we want to see him do a revival, however that's going to look, I think it takes us trusting in him. I think it takes us, we've said it throughout this, it takes us having an active faith. It takes us stepping out there. So all of us here, I made you ask that question to yourself earlier. Are you willing to trust him no matter what, whatever happens? Let's pray right now. And let's ask God, what are the things that I need to do? What's the active step I need to do? First, I'll just tell you guys, this is all of us. We need to get into his word. We need to read it. We need to pray to him. And we need to take those active steps of faith. But let's talk to him now. Like, do some shaking inside of us. Shake us to the core and then move us to follow him. Whatever that looks like. I'm not praying all the time for like millions of people showing up here. It's not about that. I just want to get around a bunch of people. We're going to follow God. We're going to follow his will. We're going to read his word. We're going to actively step out there in faith and just see what he does and just watch him do his thing. I read the Bible and I see them doing some of those things. I see them just actively following him. And I want to see that. I want to be a part of that. Not just for some show or anything, but I want to be close to God. I want to be doing it right. And so I want people around me that just, I don't have this all down. I don't claim to. But let's do this together. Let's step out there. Let's push each other and just follow him. Let's err on the side of action. You guys bow your heads.